This event takes place in the framework of the Sustainable Energy Week. This is a bit an extended part of the program. We are sort of a preview that you can have on what will be happening next week too in the EU Sustainable Energy Week. But we're very happy that we can have this online conference already today. We see it also at the very large number of participants in this call. We must be, I don't know exact number, must be around 100, between 100 and 150 for the moment. Just very briefly on district heating and cooling, why this topic and the link between district heating and cogeneration and local sustainable solutions. What we see is that we go from a centralized energy system to a decentralized energy system, and from thinking in silos to more integrated solutions, where these integrated solutions have the highest potential to be found at local level. And so almost automatically, we come into the field of heating and cooling, district heating and cooling, given the large potential to integrate a lot of elements on which a lot of discussion is taking place at EU level and at member state level and at local level, namely the development of renewable energy sources, circular economy, what do we do with waste heat, energy efficiency and requirements to really get to a different energy efficiency level to reach climate targets. And knowing this, we also know that there are some hurdles. Two, I will mention here, district heating and cooling and cogeneration find themselves at the crossroads of different pieces of legislation. There's the Renewable Energy Directive, there's the Energy Efficiency Directive, there is the market design on electricity side and the clean energy package. At the same time, it finds itself at crossroads of developments in different energy sectors, be it electricity, gas, heating and cooling, or industry. In all these different sectors, there are very strong evolutions concerning sustainability requirements on the one side and technological innovations on the other side. All this obliges us to take an integrated approach, and that's what we will try to do this afternoon, bringing together different angles of the discussion, in which we see two main elements that we need in this integrated approach. On the one hand, an energy systems integration strategy, and on the other hand, at a local level where the projects take place, a local integrated infrastructure planning. So, and this also reflects in the program, where we are very happy to welcome speakers that on the one hand represent or can say something more about the framework from the Commission and from the Parliament. And on the other hand, we have the speakers that are with their feet in the field, so to say, and are working on projects or have a very good oversight of ongoing projects. We will have, I will stop here for the brief introduction. If in the meantime you managed to connect to Slido, then we will have a first little test question, our first poll. And I don't know if this screen will show now. It is supposed to, but I already will announce. The question is, does your municipality have district heating? Yes, no. If it's a no, then, but you would like to have it, you can answer not yet, but would welcome it. And if I have no idea, and the first reactions, so please continue to give your input. Gives us a bit of an idea of who we have here in the audience. If there are people closely related with district heating or more with a general interest in it. So we see from just a very few first reactions that we have audience that on a majority has district heating close to where they live and work, and some, and we hope a little bit more, that would welcome it. Take some seconds to reply, and then knowing this, and I'm very happy that a lot of you are close to district heating. The next question is the more important one. We will leave it here for the result. We see 2/3 is involved in district heating. But now the question is, what are the main challenges to develop further high efficiency district heating? We know that also in the clean energy package, there are a lot of measures that have been proposed to as well develop in general district heating as to make district heating to more sustainable in a sense of high efficiency, and this can be reflected as well in the sustainability and the technologies being used and the connections with other infrastructures. So feel free to indicate where you think that the main challenges are. Is it at EU level? Is it at national level? Is it regulation? Is it technical issues? Is it financial issues? And if you can indicate it, that will also be very interesting for the speakers further in the session to take this into account. Also, of course, for me, it can inspire a bit of the questions that we would have later on. I see a lot of their framework and legislative regulatory issues showing up, technical issues, logically, and financial issues. And we will see coming back these different elements in the presentations that come up. I see all the elements that we had in mind are showing up here. Very interesting. And one I see coming up several times is regulation. And this is then, thank you for your responses, because this helps me a lot to introduce our first speaker, Eva Hoos. Very much welcome. You're responsible for policy area of renewable heating and cooling, and so the perfect person to set the scene, set the European scene, and clarify us a bit in what the position of the Commission is on some of the elements that were highlighted here in the start. As a general remark, I forgot to say it, that we have a perfectly gender balanced participation of speakers, of which we are very happy. Mrs. Rosa, I know the Commission is working very intensively for the moment on several communications and strategies, and we hope to learn a little more about how district heating and the link with cogeneration is taken into account in this work. You have the floor. I hear your voice. Do you have to unmute? Okay, we got the message that he was trying to unmute. Very good. In physical meetings, this is a problem we would not have, but we have all experienced by now that it sometimes takes a little bit more time to get started when we do it on these platforms.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly.
Super. Okay. All right. Super. Thank you very much for the introduction and for this very topical meeting on district heating and cooling. There is enormously a lot going on in the Commission and under the European Green Deal and under the recent recovery communication entitled Repair and Prepare for the Next Generation. In this high-speed streams of actions and work streams, district heating and cooling is going to become one of the key topics, I believe, under several actions that we prepare. And this is also related to the tendency of the Green Deal to recognize the importance of distributed energy and recognize the importance of local levels, communities and cities to actually realize the Green Deal on the ground. In this context, there are perhaps two big areas I would like to highlight. First, some of the concrete initiatives that we are working on and where district heating and cooling is going to be a very relevant area to explore. But also, I would like to highlight the recent recovery package communication adopted on the 27th of May, which put forward an unprecedented amount of financial resources and budget to accelerate the European Green Deal and in general the green and digital transition as the growth engine of the European economy and to prepare the energy transition and the fulfillment of the carbon neutrality objective by 2050. In this context, the district heating and cooling promised to be a key instrument for helping decarbonize first and foremost the heating and cooling sector, obviously, but also to help decarbonize the overall energy system of the European Union, which, despite the fact that we have made considerable progress in the last decades in increasing the share of renewables, adjusting the market frameworks to incorporate more flexibility and thus to enable it to integrate renewable energy, but also other sources, green sources. So despite the fact of this great progress, we only put down really or reach the first milestone on which we need to build, and the changes ahead are truly considerable and transformational. So the stake at hand is to still decarbonize heating and cooling, which needs to be basically zero carbon in 2050. This is not a small task, given that the overall share of fossil fuels is still around 70-75%. Also, because we need to have this overall transformation of the energy system towards more flexibility and integration. So in this context, the Commission is going to publish very soon, in the first part of July, a sector integration strategy together with the hydrogen strategy. And in the sector integration strategy, the Commission intends to highlight those instruments that help the overall flexibility and enable the currently still separated energy branches to cooperate and share energy flows in order to make the decarbonization and the carbon neutrality objective much more cost effective to achieve and easier and even technically possible to achieve. In this context, we consider district heating and cooling as sector integration hubs because they can perform many types of sector integration in one systems. They can link renewable electricity with heating and cooling, so link the electricity and the heat sectors for the heat sector, thus providing flexibility to integrate variable renewable electricity, but also to increase the share of renewables in heating and cooling through a greater use of renewable electricity. So to some extent, the role of renewable electricity is projected to increase if we look at the realistic options to decarbonize heating and cooling. And here I would mention the role of heat pumps, but also the role of cogeneration in increasing the flexibility of the overall EU energy system, but also the flexibility of the heating and cooling system, because both will need that. And in this context, cogeneration can provide first electricity when the variable renewable electricity is not so available, but also can help produce heat for storage to be used later. And cogeneration is also able to use renewable sources. And going forwards, perhaps also will be a major technology to use renewable hydrogen and renewable gases when these will be needed, perhaps mainly in high temperature and medium temperature industrial process heat. So district heating and cooling is an important instrument within the energy system integration framework that we are looking to strengthen to prepare for the overall carbon neutrality and decarbonization on the long term. Another important initiative that we are working on is the renovation wave. And one of the key features here that the renovation wave is not only a means to help the job recovery and growth in the European in the European context as a result of the COVID-19 crisis, but it is also very important to kickstart or really trigger a big renovation wave to decarbonize the EU building stock, which is an objective enshrined in the revised Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, and which is also important to decarbonize heating and cooling, since around 60% of all heating and cooling consumption is taking place in the building sector. And in this context, because we are looking at not just reducing the demand in buildings, which we obviously can do, and still there are enormous potential to do that, But we also have to look at how to decarbonize the remaining amount of energy that buildings will certainly need on the long term. And for this, we need to speed up the change in the current buildings technical systems and heating systems, which are mainly based on fossil fuels, and replace them and try to steer the process and use the renovation wave to also steer into an accelerated change in the heating systems in buildings. And for this, district heating should play a more important role, basically because the renewables are much more easy to harness and much cost effective and even technically more feasible to if we can collect renewables not just from the building and it a very restrictive land plot or roof, but from the wider neighborhood, and that makes district heating an important strategic tool to collect these renewable energy sources, but also other low carbon and carbon-free sources such as waste heat and various waste streams from municipalities and so on. So district heating is strategic to basically ensure that we have enough decarbonized energy sources to be used for fulfilling the energy demand in buildings, and therefore it should be one of the important aspects that we allow district heating to contribute much more intensively to decarbonize the building stock as so far happened until now. And that also means that we also need to encourage all kinds of community and district approaches, not just specifically district heating and cooling, but the local actors such as municipalities, but also renewable energy communities, district level actions and community level actions, and even the self-consumers to help decarbonize the building sector. And I believe this is an important new aspect which perhaps we can elaborate in this renovation wave communication, which is scheduled to come out in the autumn of this year. So these are really the very immediately relevant initiatives that we work on. I should mention the taxonomy. Many of your associations and COGEN Europe and Euroheat and Power and many other associations have been intensively involved in the taxonomy work, which will basically define what type of investment will be qualified as sustainable, and therefore will have easy green light for access to financing from both public and private funds. I think what is also important to mention here that for district heating and cooling and how to use really the green deals to harness the potential benefits of district heating and cooling and cogeneration, that all stakeholders, including member states, but also the industry, looks into very carefully the new recovery program that the Commission has adopted at the end of May. For example, the Next Generation EU framework, which is going to have 750 billion euro as a budget and intends to mobilize 1.85 trillion euro by involving private investors as well. And the main spending priority of this new budget will be on the green and digital transition. It will work very closely with member states using the national energy and climate plans, using the new national recovery plans, but also the EU semester to allocate these enormous resources for the European Green Deal. Many other pillars of this recovery package are important for the energy sector, and within this, the district heating and cooling sector. I should highlight that the recovery package is not defining what kind of solutions and technologies should be beneficiaries and should receive a boost for their value chain. This is really during the negotiations that still have to be concluded, and the implementation of this package that will define that. But I believe district heating and cooling is very well placed in this process, even if not mentioned specifically. I should also mention that we are working on renewable cooling and what renewable cooling and district renewable.
Sorry, can I ask you to finalize?
Yes. So I think what the key message is that district heating and cooling has become really in front and center of the Green Deal and the European energy policies. The doors are wide open. This is really for the sector to use these opportunities. And within the Commission, we have noted the importance and potential contribution of this sector, together with Cogeneration that has been there for a long time. And we give full trust that this sector will perform in the service of the European Green Deal. And this is also for the industry to deliver on these potentials and promises. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Rose. This was a very complete overview in a very short time slot. It's clear is that the overarching ambition is decarbonization, but I'm very glad that you also highlighted feasibility and cost effectiveness and the required cooperation of the different energy vectors working together, something we for the moment do not see so clearly in different streams developed by the Commission, like on sustainable finance. It's not always that clear for the moment, for example, in the field of cogeneration. I will for the moment, I will keep some questions maybe for later on, and then have first the next speakers complete and give the concrete projects. I just want one point that I still have to clarify on the program, that Mr. Pushoy will make a point at the end of the session and give a view of the Parliament. Now we have had very clear overview of the plans of the Commission, also from the Parliament point of view, where they are positioning in the field of district heating and local energy solutions and cogeneration. I want also to repeat for all participants, if you have questions, you can go to Slido. You have a Q&A part there. Preferably, we keep the questions there. It's easier to organize for us. Mr. Joseph, if you don't mind, I will keep some questions till after the panel has been finalized. Is that okay for you? Okay, I'm still used to live panels, you have to mute and unmute every time. So I consider this as a yes and as a rhetorical question. I'm sorry. I will give the floor immediately to our next speaker, Mrs. Camila Vachega. She is the Director of Energy in the Public Affairs Department of Veolia, who are in developing concrete projects in for district heating. Mrs. Vachega is also the chair of the COGEN Energy Policy Working Group. So I think she has at the same time the experience of an industrial group and the overview of an association with a wide membership. The floor is yours.
Okay, I try to, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll try to share the screen again because when I was sharing, I could not unmute myself. My apologies. Can you see my screen? No. Okay, I'll try again. Hold on. Screen connecting. Share. Okay. Yes. Okay. Okay. Now Camilla. Okay, let's do that. Okay. Right. My apologies. It takes a little bit of time to find the right combination, technological combination. So thank you for the introduction. I will be speaking on behalf of the association COGEN Europe, that is a co-organizer of this event. And I just wanted to remind that COGEN Europe is a cross-sectoral voice of cogeneration industry in Europe. And we are working with EU institutions and stakeholders to better shape policies that can impact the future of cogeneration. Very briefly, what is the principle behind cogeneration? Basically, it's a solution. It's a technology, it's a solution that can use all types of sources of energy, be it fossil fuels or renewables, be it in the form of solid fuels or gas-based, and that actually transforms those fuels in parallel into heat and electricity. And it can transform up to 90% of the energy into useful fuel, heat, and power for various applications. It is also a very interesting integration solution for local energy system and local energy loops, because as you can see on the slide, it enables the linkages between the electricity, heat and gas system. It also enables us, when it's installed, to minimize any waste of valuable energy resources, and it also improves overall system efficiency. It boosts flexibility of the entire system, basically by supplying the dispatchable power. This is especially important in the framework of a more and more decentralized and intermittent renewable-based power systems. It lowers the overall energy system costs and brings value at local level near the consumer, because cogeneration installations are by their very essence, they are a local solution that is installed on site. So as mentioned earlier, they are embedded in the entire economy, because you can find CHP solutions basically in multiple settings and in multiple uses. For example, you have micro CHP in individual homes and in individual buildings. You can use CHP in public buildings, in the tertiary sector as well, in the services, in settings such as hospitals and supermarkets. You can find cogeneration units very often in the industrial sites. And last but not least, because this is the essence of our panel today, CHP is an extremely valuable solution that it's used in district heating, being industrial district heating or urban district heating. Our ambition as an organization is obviously through the use of cogeneration to support ambitious Green Deal that has been announced by the European Commission and that Eva Haus mentioned earlier. Today, cogeneration delivers only 11% of electricity and 60.5% of heat. And 70% of European district heating heat supply is actually ensured through cogeneration. This represents as much as 360 terawatts of primary energy savings, which corresponds to 10% of the EU 2020 energy efficiency target. So this is equivalent to the possibility to avoid CO2 emissions of 100 million petrol-driven cars. So this is very significant. And by 2030, cogeneration could actually deliver even more because there is a potential to deliver at least 20% of EU electricity and 25% of the EU heat by using this solution. Of which new and upgraded CHP can actually ensure 80% of the EU 2030 energy efficiency target and be responsible for more than 1/3 of the additional efforts to raise Green Deal ambition to from 50 to 55% of greenhouse emissions reductions compared to 1990. So this is quite a significant contribution that just one technological solution can bring into equation and to contribute significantly to the Green Deal ambition. Our interest in cogeneration is also because, as mentioned earlier, it's a significant input for district heating networks that are discussed today. And we see CHP as a future-proof solution to 2050, also in the context of district heating and decarbonizing district heating, because CHP can supply heat to district heating in a cost-competitive way, and it also helps deliver the decarbonization pledge as a part of a mix of various solutions. So it's in addition to other solutions used in the heat sector. Also by using carbon neutral energy sources in a more efficient way, such as, for example, decarbonized gases, and supporting the grids through flexible power production. Again, as mentioned earlier, this is very important in the context where there will be more and more electricity in the grid, and especially renewable electricity that will come from intermittent sources. There will be a more and more demand for baseload electricity that is flexible and dispatchable in almost immediately, and CHP can ensure that. So introducing CHP with district heating is a part of an optimized mix for a net zero carbon solution that can decrease the cost of heat by up to 11%. So taking into account a mix of solutions delivering heat, including boilers, heat pumps, and heat storage. So this is the mix that we've mentioned before, that can run on a range of green gases, both when CHP operation is maximized for being heat-driven and power-driven. So it works for both configuration. And also we can see the benefits of decrease of heat costs by using CHP in district heating across different energy mixes and climatic zones, And this is specifically estimated for Spain, Poland, and Sweden. These are the results of an ongoing study that COGEN Europe is currently carrying on the contribution of cogeneration to the 2050 climate objectives. So this is an ongoing study.
Can you finalize, please?
Yes. So this is just to sum up and to say that our sector is committed to the creation of a resilient, decentralized and carbon neutral European energy system by 2050. And we believe that by combining CHP and district heating, we can actually do that. And you will be hearing just after my presentation concrete examples of how we can do that with district heating as well. Thank you very much for your attention.
And thank you very much, Ms. Fatiega, for sticking to the time. I know it's we have a very ambitious timing schedule, and therefore I will immediately go on to our next speaker. Again, if you have questions, please send them to the Slido part, and then following after the different panel speakers, we can then pick up questions from there. I will give the floor now to Mr. Julian Benders from the municipality of Rotterdam. He's responsible as process manager and advisor on urban sustainability, and he will tell us more how to tackle district heating projects, how they tackle this in Rotterdam in close cooperation between the city and different industrial and societal stakeholders. Mr. Benders, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you for having me and sharing with you a glimpse of indeed what the state of is of our heat district network and what our approach is to see what we can do with heat districts and how we think to achieve it. Unfortunately, for some of you, my camera is probably black. I can see myself, but some of you maybe cannot see me. My apologies for that, but let's go straight to the presentation. For those of you who don't know where Rotterdam is a city within the Netherlands. It's one of the biggest ports here in Europe. Being a port city, most of our carbon emissions come, of course, from our port. Yet alone, our city side is roughly the same as Amsterdam, Utrecht, or The Hague. Well, we should supposed to have been the host city this year for the Eurovision Song Festival. Then you can all have visit us. But unfortunately, by Corona, it's postponed to next year. So you're more than welcome to come and visit us. Well, what did we do? Well, first of all, in 2018, we were looking for what direction for decarbonization of our built environment can we take. So we did a lot of analysis. Will it be more gas-based, or will it be heat districts, or all electric, where you can think about heat pumping. Well, the analysis showed that most of our city will benefit with heat system. We looked actually at most of the costs for the investment, keeping it running the system that you choose for your replacement of carbon-based heat gas. Most of our city is still using gas, fossil gas, to heat their homes, and also the energy cost that will be coming by that. So we see that most of how the redder the color is, mostly like it's 75% more affordable on a social level. For if you take together all the costs, then the next solution is mostly all electric for a city. Well, using a heat grid isn't unfamiliar to us. We already have a heat system since the early 60s. Roughly 1/3, well, close to 1/3 of our built environment already uses heat. It used to be with just gas stations throughout the city, because we feel that back then it's much more efficient to create heat in one source and then distribute it than all the individual heat sources in the homes. It used to be gas power centrals back then. Now it's also heat power systems and our waste disposal facility. We're closing those in the future, hoping to go to more residual heat from the harbor. Well, why do we have such a large heat district system? Well, that's because, of course, the war. Rotterdam was bombed, making us capitulate. And after the war, we built a very dense city back. So mostly you can see the denser you go and the older the buildings go, the more heat district systems benefit for your built environment. We can also see it like the power demand. Unfortunately, it's in Dutch, but roughly our words are the same as in English. You can see we have a lot of potential in the region, a lot of energy. Residual heat can come from the port industry, but also geothermal or aquathermal energy, yet the energy demand is very low for heat. Well, if you look at our energy demand for mobility or industries or the other sectors, you see a really spike in our energy demands, yet the potential for solar and wind energy in the region, well, the Netherlands is a very dense country, is not that much. So that's why also from a strategy point of view, we look for heat districts or heat systems within our districts. Well, last year we also looked for, we know the course we want to go, but where can we start? We actually started to analyze our cities from 3 points of views. Where can we start with the cooperation between parties? Where can we find it feasible and affordable from a buildings perspective, but also from a social economic perspective? Can people afford it? So for the cooperation, we start to look at the planning of our gas provider, that's stating where he wants to go the next few years with maintaining the gas system, but also pipes, sewage systems. We look for like where are we going into the ground the next few years. Can we also implement a heat system to cooperate in that point of view? Our housing corporations is about 46% of our city is social housing. They get a lot of mass in our city. So if they have plans, we can maybe couple that with a private housing and the distance to the heat source analysis. The blue spots in our city is already where we started with expanding our heat systems. The green spots are where we analyze it, and the purple spots is where we finalizing our research, but it's also mostly away from our heat district system. Can we do something locally with maybe a data center or the water systems there? Well, looking from a point of view from our buildings perspective, it's kind of like the same as the what chart. It's like the density, what kind of owners are there, what kind of construction years. The low-hanging fruits, that's mostly the big buildings would have a collective kettle downstairs in the basement. Well, then you just have to put a heat pipe in and you're already done, mostly. Well, a little bit short, but mostly that's the way you go. And the housing supervision that starts with us like, okay, which areas in our city are really having other difficulties to think about climate adaptations or foundation problems. Maybe you want to wait there before you go there with your energy transition. And looking from a social perspective, we looked at motivation research. We looked at the income from people and mostly of course on abstracted level, and also the social index. So where are highly educated people with who can work together with us with expanding sustainability. But how do we approach that? Well, our goal is mainly to have a clean, safe, reliable, and affordable energy supply for all. So we looked at the techniques, of course, the financial situations, the social structures, and what kind of opportunities. That's in a nutshell our approach. Yet again, we also look, of course, with a regional energy strategy, like how can we use energy in a high value way? We want to use our scarce gases in the industry because they need to have the hot supplies, but maybe we can use residual heat from the industry into our city, and maybe even reuse that heat for more newly built buildings. So we use the same heat multiple times. So not all on the same gases, well, actually all on the same gases, but not use gases separately. Yet again, looking at the opportunity, what can you do with your heat district? Well, of course, connecting the local challenges and dreams. Can we indeed have an impact in the cost for energy? Also, how do we link our citizens to the unemployment of this energy expansion? Like, can they help reshape our built environment? Can they help put in the pipes in the ground? How we can educate our citizens for the next jobs in line of the energy transitions? And of course, this year with COVID-19, we started to help businesses and people with energy vouchers, with one hand helping to clean and green our built environment, but on the other hand, make sure that local businesses who are in the build techniques have the jobs for the next few months and years. So it works both ways. Well, that's in a nutshell our approach, and I hope to see you back in the panel discussion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Benders. You get the trophy so far for the highest discipline on timing, and a very interesting presentation from which I remember several elements that are very important in the whole discussion. Is on the feasibility and affordability and the social elements that you also highlighted. The second is the cooperation with local actors like social housing corporations and utilities, be it in energy or water. And then the last one that brings me also to the next speaker is the regional energy strategy that is necessary, because I think it was a very good example, a very concrete example you gave. You do not start from a white paper. You have a certain environment, you have a potential of resources, and build on that you have to build your regional energy strategy. I think it's very
we do indeed try to build on what exists already, and that's a plus, so we can already build from past experience, but also hazard in already the social structures or the partnership that's already in hand. For instance, the concession area, so we have already private players, but how can we socialize more this energy transition to include everybody, and not just making the best business deals, but also some challenges incorporate in the bigger pictures.
Thank you for this first additional reaction. I have no questions for the moment. We will keep them also for the end. I propose then to switch immediately to our next speaker, Mrs. Ana Otilia Nutu, who is from Romania, and particular here is, as we know, that Bucharest has one of the largest district heating grids in the European Union. She's very well placed also as member of a Romanian expert forum that is working on energy infrastructures, and where she has specifically a role as policy analysts. So I give you immediately the floor, Mrs. Nutu, and to other speakers that could still have the microphone on, please, please mute. And Mrs. Nutu, please unmute.
Thank you very much for the invitation, and I will just present a couple of slides. So it's not a presentation by itself, but I'll just discuss a little bit on their margin. Let me try to share my screen. Application window. All right. Is it visible?
Yes.
Okay, so first of all, I would like to say that there is a first very important difference between Western Europe and Central and Eastern Europe in the sense of how district heating has been traditionally viewed and what was its role in the energy mix of the countries. So generally in Central and Eastern Europe, in former communist countries, we had a very heavy and energy intensive industry. And district heating was mostly a sort of byproduct from cogeneration plants, which were generally distributed around cities on industrial platforms, and who are delivering electricity and heat mostly for the industry. While only a small fraction of the heat that was actually produced was being distributed to the households. Now, this has a very important role nowadays because the whole structure of the sector has changed significantly. So the energy intensive industry has been shut down, and most of the power plants and the cogeneration plants which deliver currently heating to the cities, to households, are very far away from the city, oversized with obsolete assets, very large pipes, so they are quite inefficient. So if we look at the tendencies around Europe, we see that mostly in Eastern Europe, Central and Eastern Europe, the tendency is for district heating to go down, while in the West, it is being now discovered as one of the most sustainable and efficient solutions for heat. If you look at general parameters, you'll see that generally the systems in Central and Eastern Europe are twice as inefficient, 3 times more losses and physical losses plus heat losses and so on. Now, I would speak a little bit about Bucharest district heating, because in Romania it's actually half of the whole sector. So 50% of the district heating sector in Romania is composed by the Bucharest city. The system is quite large. It has several large cogeneration plants, which, unlike in the other cities, are still within the city. There are about 500,000 connected consumers. That means 1.2 million people. Yeah, so 500,000 households, 1.2 million users. And distribution of the the habitations in Bucharest is quite dense. So we have very dense neighborhoods which are packed with blocks of flats and where there would be no realistic alternative to district heating. Because the only alternative that we have would be individual gas-fired boilers, and considering the density of the city, that would be not only inefficient but highly polluting. So just to give you an idea about how the system is shaped, so we have several plants here and there, mostly inside the city but close to the border of the city. And some of these plants have been shut down because they were very inefficient. So this is the network. It has a ring which allows the power plants, the CHPs, to deliver heat from here to the other side of the city in case there is a malfunctioning. But these two in the north and in the east have been shut down because they were so inefficient that they simply they were incapable to deliver heat to this part of the city. So now we have a very inefficient system which delivers heat from the south all the way 13 kilometers to the north and the east of the city. The problem is that about 80 or 90% of the assets, including generation and the transmission and distribution grids, have not been replaced in the past 30 years. So they are only a small fraction of it is insulated. They are quite old and at the same time obsolete in technical point of view. The level of disconnection of the households is actually very low, simply because the prices for heat are still being subsidized in Bucharest, and particularly in Bucharest is one of the lowest prices for household consumption of heat in Romania, even though Bucharest is the richest city in the country. This is one of the reasons that why people don't disconnect, but at the same time, the quality of the service has been declining substantially in recent years because there are a lot of damages and the losses, including physical water losses, have increased substantially in the past 3-5 years. Just to give you an idea about the level of subsidization, this is actually from 2018. The situation is even worse now. So this is Bucharest, and you could see the amount in blue is what people are paying, and this is the amount of the subsidy that the local government is giving. We are here, we are now somewhere here for Bucharest for this year. So that means that the consumers in Bucharest are paying only about a third to a quarter of the real price of the heat. Now, what I would want to add is the fact that you really need investments to turn around the system and to allow investments, to allow even private sector participation, and particularly in the integration of new sources. Now, the biggest crisis that we are going to face in the district heating Bucharest is, first of all, the financial crisis that the whole system is in. So practically, the municipality has to subsidize 3/4 of the cost, while at the same time, but it doesn't always pay. So there are arrears which are now amounting to over 1 billion euros. So that is one of the problems. As long as you don't have a clear payment mechanism and you cannot ensure that consumers are or potential investors can recover any investments, you will not have investments to compensate for the closure of the two plants in the north and east of the city. And there is very little incentive to integrate renewables, even though Bucharest may potentially have some opportunities in certain parts of the cities to integrate, for example, geothermal. There are also some plans, including with EU financing, to integrate a waste to energy incinerator. But all these things simply don't move forward, particularly because there is a high institutional fragmentation. The generation belongs to the central government, the networks belong to the local government. There is little willingness to increase the prices, particularly in electoral years. And nobody is really taking any clear leadership of this process. And I would stop here because otherwise I think I would be exceeding my time, but I'm waiting for comments and questions.
Perfectly on time, and Mr. Benders will have to give his timing trophy to you. Now, I'm really thank you for the very interesting message that you brought, because this was an element that we did not discuss so far. That's the financial element, and how do you organize investments in cases of, let's say, collective or cooperative infrastructures, whereas the whole framework of the European energy markets are based, as the word says, on markets, free choice, and market prices. Where we are partly, in the case of district heating, also talking about public infrastructure with possible interventions of, be it local authorities or regional or state authorities. This is certainly a point that needs further discussion. What is the link between effectively the energy efficiency of the infrastructure and the investments, the costs of the heat coming out of it, and how are prices, how is affordability of the heat, and are there regulated prices, like it is the case in a lot of countries, also for electricity. Still about half of the EU member states have even an electricity market, and parts of the gas market regulated prices. We tend to forget that, but that's the reality. So it's a very important element that cannot be overseen, and maybe the whole recovery package could be an ideal occasion to overcome some of the barriers that, like a very important one that you just highlighted. I think that we had a very nice overview. I would have now, just having a look if there are any questions being suggested. I have some for the different speakers, and I will ask the question to first to Mrs. Hoos, as I will try to follow the same order. Normally, I can be more a bit creative in a physical meeting, but I have to be a bit more structured here. We see two things. We have, on the one hand, the implementation of the clean energy package, where we see that there is a delay in the implementation of some of the elements. And there, one of what the questions is, what can be done, or what from then, mainly then the speakers coming from the projects or from member states, what do you expect from as an action from the Commission or from your member state to kickstart the progress, and how to involve this local aspect? That's one question I would have. And then another question I have is strategic policy support a missing link to have a faster development of district heating, or is it more a pure financial issue? It will always be a mix of different elements, a financial, a technical, a cooperation element. But where do you think, and I would like to start with Mrs. Hoos, and also on the point of the recovery package, where exactly, taking into account this financial aspect, where exactly do you see room for more focused support for the development of district heating and cooling? For the moment, we have a bit of a vague impression of a lot of instruments being put on the table, but not so clear where exactly the actors that are involved in district heating should address their attention on when financial instruments will be made available. So Mrs. Hoos, I have just two questions. Can you support on the implementation of the clean energy package, and where do you see possible focused support for district heating and cooling and recovery package? I will mute, and if you can unmute.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted. So the implementation, this is a priority, and it was announced as such under the European Green Deal. We are working very intensively on implementation for the heating and cooling provisions under both the Renewable Energy Directive and the Energy Efficiency Directive. We cooperate especially on the comprehensive assessment for heating and cooling, which now need to integrate also the potentials to use renewable energy and waste heat and cold, in particular for district heating and cooling, since this is really the only eligible way under RED 2 to account waste heat and cold for the heating and cooling target. And we recognize that there are many implementation issues on the RED 2, which is still being transposed into national legislation. And we work on this very closely with member states in the concerted action forum. We intend, and I think also do already involve stakeholders in this process to clarify the implementation framework. So this is a priority, and it is require a lot of work and a lot of effort, and we are quite aware of that. Now, in terms of strategic policy support, I believe that for district heating, we need to move on all tracks. So there is room to improve the regulatory framework for promoting efficient district heating and cooling, and this is going to be one of the topics we aim to develop under the reviews of the legislation, so the RED 2 and the EED. But perhaps also this could be taken into account if there will be a review of the EPBD, which I don't know, but we are actually looking all options to come up to the speed that the Green Deal requires from EU policies.
Okay, I think that's a perfect answer on the question. I'm sorry for the other panel members, but I will need a little patience to give your answers on the question I suggested. I would propose that Mr. Bouchoy, who just joined us, that you would first take the floor. We very much welcome that you have taken the time with the busy schedule of the chairman of the Energy Committee in the Parliament. We are very curious to hear what actions you foresee, what position you have from the members of the European Parliament. You will play a very important role in any development of a future legislative framework at European level. So we are very curious to know, to learn your first thoughts about the potential and the role of district heating and how you think the European Parliament could help to bring district heating and cooling in a sustainable way forward in the next years. Give you the floor.
Thank you so much, and sorry for not being able to be from the beginning, but it was a last-minute meeting on the EU health program, because I'm also responsible. I'm the rapporteur of the European Parliament for the next health program, which became important and with a very much increased budget. But I'm coming back with pleasure to the energy issues, because being the chair of committee on industry, research and energy, energy is one of the top priorities of European Parliament or European policy makers. I will make a brief overview on the most important initiatives at the EU level and in the committee, and of course I will say a few words about the topics today. What is important to acknowledge is the fact that the current crisis has brought changes to the EU energy landscape and outlook, and some of these changes are positive, but the crisis also brought boosted budget and opportunities to speed up the work and the transition to the climate neutrality by 2050, and the recovery plan for next generation is by far the biggest and ambitious EU put at stake. The discussions today go far beyond climate targets. We have to take close look to the energy security dimension and also to the sustainability, and now more than before with the economic crisis that is coming after the medical crisis. More than ever, I think that now we should ensure consistency across policies, streamline Green Deal ambitions with feasible transition, ensuring further the resilience of the energy system while keeping affordable costs. The energy sector plays a central role in the recovery with the Green Deal at its core. In September 2020, the Commission will present an action plan for building renovation to trigger a renovation wave across EU, which intends to be even more ambitious in the framework of the recovery plan. In its resolution of 15 of January 2020 on European Green Deal, Parliament called in addition for a revision on the energy performance of buildings directive. It also called for a revision of the 10E guidelines before the adoption of the next list of projects of common interest. The heating sector currently represents 50% of the final energy consumption, and the EU building stock is the largest single energy consumer in Europe, with 40% of energy consumption and 36% of EU gas emissions. So it's important to invest in the renovation and in energy efficiency, and of course this is also an important issue for many of the participants of the today discussions. Approximately 80% of today's buildings will still be in use in 2050, and it is evaluated that 75% of this stock is energy inefficient. Currently, very low energy renovation rates, it's approximately 1% across the EU, are of course insufficient and do not ensure necessary energy savings, and will need to at least double in the coming years in order to achieve our goal, our strategic goal on a decarbonization neutral European Union by 2050. Given its weight in the overall energy mix and at the same time the potential for decarbonization, the heating sector should be the one where energy efficiency efforts are deployed first. It means renovation of existing building stocks and the construction of new facilities following the principles of near zero energy buildings, but also reducing primary energy consumption on the supply side. Maximizing the deployment of renewable energies will imply a continuous fossil fuel and will necessarily contribute towards further electrification across Europe. Electrification being one of the answers in order to reduce our dependency on the fossil fuels. The roadmap on the renovation wave proposed by the Commission in May already will seek to establish an action plan with concrete measures to address the main barriers and reinforce the pull factors for faster and deeper renovation, gradually triggering at least a doubling of current renovation rates and reducing the greenhouse gas footprint. This will consider legislative and non-legislative instruments and enabling tools, financing and non-financing aspects, and different levels of action. Of course, the EU level, the national, but also very important will be local and regional level. I believe that you will find in the current initiatives, in the future initiatives at the EU level, many incentives for your plans, for your investment plans. I look closely to Romania, to my home country, because there we need measures. Also, for us, the district heating, it's a sensitive and important issue, and many challenges, many problems with this, and we are looking very closely to the European opportunities. We'll have, of course, the recovery plan, the recovery funds, where this kind of investments could be eligible. I believe also that we should look closely to the Just Transition Mechanism and Just Transition Fund in those regions which are eligible, and see how we could increase the investment in this sector. And of course, we have the cohesion policy for some countries, at least Central and East European countries would rely a lot on cohesion policy in order to. Thank you so much. And of course, the most important fact will be to receive from yourself, from all the relevant stakeholders, the necessary inputs for policies, but also for concrete actions in order to use more clean energy for green recovery and growth, and also to use all the opportunities in order to transform our energy systems, our heating systems, but also to more competitivity, to more prosperity, and to increase the number of jobs. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bușoi. I very much appreciate what you said, especially about consistency of initiatives, and of also in the near future, the need to be consistent on initiatives that address different goals like security of supply and sustainability and affordability. And therefore the different strategies and funding of different initiatives will need a strong coordination, and we hope that the European Parliament and yourself, especially as chair of the ITRE committee, will continue to be attentive for these strategical elements. Thank you very much, and
so much,
of
and
course,
good luck. We stay close together, and please send us to the Parliament everything you consider significant in order to. We are just discussing many of these initiatives. Of course, now the member states will negotiate with the European Commission on how we can better invest the money available. Energy is one of the green energy is one of the main priorities, but also district heating using this kind of energy solutions, green energy solutions, and the solutions technologies of the future would be eligible, and it's important not to lose momentum.
Absolutely. And feel free to continue the last few minutes of our webinar. I want to give the other panel members each a concluding question. In fact, with the questions I asked them before, how important for the three speakers, Mr. Vasiega, Mr. Benders, and Mrs. Nutu, how strategic do you think that there is currently a piece of a European strategy missing? And if you would have to choose one element, which one would you ask to the Commission or the Parliament? I propose the following, follow the same order, Mrs. Vasiega.
Well, I think that as we heard from Eva Haas' intervention, we pretty much have a very interesting framework in place regarding district heating and its promotion that stems from Renewable Directive that was revised in 2018 and Energy Efficiency Directive revised also in 2018. And we have articles that are specifically promoting development of high efficiency district heating networks. They're greening, their better efficiency and their better contribution. I think that the missing piece, but it's the piece that it's coming, is the smart sector integration strategy and how district heating will be integrated into a broader framework of integrated energy systems. We know that the strategy has been postponed to the 8th of July, so we are waiting for this one to know how district heating will be situated in this broader approach to a better and more efficient and more circular and integrated energy systems. So I would say this is the missing piece, and also the second missing piece is, as Eva Haas said, is in the implementation. Implementation and transposition in member states is a tricky piece of puzzle. We see it from what it's being transmitted to us regarding, for example, EED and Article 14 on comprehensive assessment. Member states are struggling even with the methodologies to adapt to conduct those assessments. So I would say that as to paraphrase maybe implementation full, it's the one that counts, and how we can support member states to better understand what Commission expects from them and how they can put concrete strategies and supporting measures to achieve objectives in those existing legislative pieces.
That's very clear. Mr. Benders?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think district heating is also not just a local thing, but more from a strategic point from the European Union, of course, also a logic strategic course, in the sense that we need less electricity, renewable energy built or to generate it, because the use of residual heating. So from that point of view, you want to implement more of that course on a European level. And of course, it's also more an infrastructure challenge, because there's also a lot of actors. In my presentation, it looks very easy, like we try to expand our system, but the system is not ours. It's a lot of private actors, needs to go bills, and we're trying to, of course, generate the knowledge and expand our heating system, because we see the benefits for our citizens, because it's lower demands on changing your buildings, less costs. But then again, a lot of implementation of what it's going to be the costs, or when we're going to start where, is with private actors. So I'm hoping that on a European level, there will be more thinking about how can we invest in the next structure of distributing heat, not only for cities, but also what we're trying to do here in the Netherlands on a regional level, trying to use the energy from the port. But again, what does the heat come from in the port? We need to develop also the port on different elements. So what my previous speaker also said about the integration of the system with a broader vision above that is necessary, but also the investments in the infrastructure and the regulations to implement it.
Very good. The last word for Mrs. Nutu, your message point.
I'd better make it memorable then. No, I was thinking also about implementation, and again, I think this is a difference between better governed countries and less well governed countries.
Thank you so much.
Sorry. Okay. I think the European Commission and the European institutions have set up a very good framework in general to support decarbonization in general. There is also a lot of financing support available, including recently with new instruments. The question is how to stimulate the member states as well to take on the responsibility. They should internalize as well these values because, for example, we have a lot of EU funds which we do not absorb, including for district heating. The district heating in Bucharest will probably lose the financial allocation, the financial grant from the Commission. And also, maybe in terms of what the European Commission could do better, this is my experience from at that time with the third energy package. It could build, let's say, a coalition with the smaller stakeholders, not necessarily with the governments only. It really needs to communicate better that most of these measures, the directives, the financing instruments are in the benefits of the consumers. Because sometimes, let's say, the biggest bottleneck for development is, let's say, the governments themselves, let's say, or national players. And the Commission is actually a better ally for the smaller guys.
Thank you. And I think this, again, also proves the large diversity that exists within the European Union, where you have different backgrounds, different situations, different energy mixes, different degrees of development of renewable energy sources that are being used in the electricity or the heating sector. And for example, one of the elements that we, to our regret, did not have the time to discuss is, but that maybe will for a next occasion, is on the sustainable sources that can be used to make district heating and cooling more sustainable. We did not discuss about lower temperature heat grids, about geothermal sources, about renewable decarbonized gases that will be able to be used in cogeneration and in district heating and cooling in the future. But these are all other elements, as we have just also experienced throughout this whole webinar. There's nothing is simple in life, and it's certainly not district heating and cooling. Luckily, and we hope that the Commission will continue consistently in the development of a supportive strategy, be it through the energy system integration, sustainable finance and taxonomy, hopefully also a package that addresses the question of renewable and decarbonized gases, including hydrogen. for which a strategy is also on the table for the moment. So there's a lot of, as said in the beginning, we're on the crossroads of a lot of domains, be it legal, technical, environmental, and we hope that we have lifted a tip of the veil of many of these aspects, but certainly not all the aspects that could be covered on a discussion like the one today. We have to close. If you can go to Slido, we have a final question, a concluding question that could help us for future occasions, namely, and if we can shift to the slide, then you will see the question there. What are your main takeaways of this webinar? Try to focus it in one word or 2 words. You can send us also 10 times 1 word, but this will probably not be readable as a sentence then. But just to give us an idea, the feeling you have with the content of this session, and what would the word that synthesizes the most of the discussion for yourself today? And it will only be open for a few seconds more, but what I see is national stories and integration, and the need for analysis, and I think what definitely is needed, it's not only national stories, but we need an EU framework to assist and support national stories, where local actors play an important role, where financing aspects will be very important. I can also wait until a lot more come on, but I think this is a nice way to end this webinar. I want to thank again the organizers, Covenant of Mayors, COGEN Europe, and the European Commission, that we together with CEDEC could organize this. I particularly want to thank all the speakers for their efforts also in preparing this session and for being available during this afternoon for a few hours. Thank you very much for sharing your valuable time. I hope you find it also a valuable time as an attendant, and if we have any future initiative on the same topic, then we hope that we can welcome you again. I wish you a nice afternoon and hope to welcome you back in a video conference or in a physical meeting, hopefully not too far away in the future. Thank you very much.